and welcome to the third season of the Anahita Speaker Series presented by Carnegie India. The Anahita Speaker Series celebrates stirring stories of empowerment, struggle, and success from women professionals in different fields across the globe. Stories we hope are bound to inspire young professionals. I'm a Nahat Kaur Research Assistant and Program Coordinator for the Security Studies Program at Carnegie India. We're delighted to have with us today Aanchal Malhotra. Aanchal is an oral historian and writer from Delhi. She is the co-founder of the Museum of Material Memory, a crowdsourced digital repository tracing family histories and social ethnography through heirlooms, collectibles, and antiques from the Indian subcontinent. She writes extensively on the 1947 partitions and its related topics. Her first book, Remnants of Separation, was published in 2017 and has great critical acclaim. It is our pleasure to have you with us today, Aanchal.
Thank you so much for having me.
Could you tell us a little bit about your journey as an oral historian and if you faced any obstacles as a woman in the field of in oral history?
That's such a great question. And I think my first response would be that because I didn't come from a field of history or literature, my biggest challenge was learning about the craft of oral history itself, which meant learning on the job as I was speaking to people. I come from the world of visual art. I was trained as a printmaker. So, to not only familiarize yourself with the terrain of partition, but also how to ask questions about it empathetically and in a nuanced fashion, was something that will continue to be a challenge for me, I think, because each interview is different and you learn with every conversation you have. I think apart from that, one of the major challenges I faced was how to represent an event that has for so long been represented in almost a singular monolith way, which is through the lens of violence and trauma. How to represent it in a different way or through varying perspectives so that people can see the event as something that is evolving and not a static event from the past. It has to be something that has resonance today, that has obviously a longer lasting effect. And then to your last question of being a woman in the field of oral history, I think this is something that I faced from day one, because even as a field researcher, there are places and times of day, very simply put, that men can venture out to do their research where women can't. That's the first thing. The other thing was how to be taken seriously as a woman historian in a field largely dominated by men. How to, not only is the field ageist and sexist, but I found myself overcompensating in very strange ways, like wearing my glasses to academic panels or wearing a sari to look older because people belittle you otherwise. And they did for many years. Now it's been 10 years that I've been writing about this, and I have established my work in a way that people do take it seriously. But I think at the beginning, when you're in your 20s, it is very hard, particularly if you're doing something which is a new way of looking at an older event. There will always be questions. There will always be, oh, but you're only writing about memory. And memory is not history. Memory is not truth. But I think every woman in every field does navigate this, and obviously does face this as well.
Achal, in most of your writing, you've, like you mentioned, highlighted the human aspect. You've bypassed the numbers and the statistics and highlighted the human aspect of the partition. Another thing that has really impacted your writing is material memory. So alongside your writing career, you're also the founder of the Museum of Material Memory, which is the first of its kind in India. It is a digital repository which traces culture in the Indian subcontinent through materials such as heirlooms, books, art, household decor, and some very basic items. Can you tell me what was the driving force behind this project?
The simple answer would be that I was writing about objects of partition in my own life. And, particularly I think in South Asian families, we are collectors or almost hoarders of objects. And what we don't realize is that we deposit parts of ourselves into those objects, whether it is an aged object or an object of everyday use. And I saw this in my research. I saw it, for example, I remember speaking to a woman who showed me a shawl that had come from what is now Pakistan to India. And at the beginning of our conversation, she was very nonchalant about that shawl. Oh, yes, my mother gave it to me, and I wore it as I walked to India. But at the end of the conversation, after 2 or 3 hours of speaking about that shawl, I said, "Oh, may I borrow this shawl for my research? I'll return it to you." And she said, "No, no, no, it's mine. It's my mother's. It has so much importance in it." So I think we need sometimes an external force to show us how objects have this power of transportation, but also power of memory. And to touch them and caress them and smell them and feel them sometimes really can take you to another time and place. So, in my own work, I was writing about objects of partition, but there are aged objects throughout the subcontinent. And along with a friend, we decided to set up a digital archive to invite people to write about old objects in their home. You may see like an ink pot on a shelf in your grandmother's house, and you must have seen it since you were a child, but now this may give you an opportunity to ask about it and ask about the person that it belonged to. So I think it was a way to start to archive the material culture of the subcontinent in a borderless manner, which is why it's also a digital archive, so that people from Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, Nepal, Afghanistan can access it and see the similarity, I think, between the ways in which we live in our houses.
Aanchal, over 7 decades have passed since the partition, and it remains a pertinent event even today. How do you think the continuum of the historical legacy of the partition can be maintained for the future generations? And what do you think, along with academic scholarships, what other avenues can be explored to preserve the legacy of the partition?
That's a great question. Um, the first thing I want to say is any event seen through the prism of memory will always offer us endless possibilities to remember it by. Um, every generation will have a new way to find associations to the event and relate to it in their own way. Many people tell me that partition is a subject that has no interest anymore, but I don't think that's true. I don't think it'll ever be true, in fact. There will never be a time where we will exhaust the possibilities of what all we can explore within the landscape of partition. In terms of keeping it alive, I think there are museums that have come up in India and Pakistan. There are archives that survive now that have interviewed thousands of people. The one thing that I was very struck by is the lack of memorials, though. Take, for example, our city of Delhi, where I live, where thousands of refugees came and started their lives after partition in camps like Kingsway Camp in North Delhi, or Sarojini Nagar Camp, or Purana Killa, or Humayun's Tomb. In these places, there is not a single plaque that tells you that millions of people came here, how they lived, what they ate, how many tents were there, how they educated themselves, how they started their lives. I think this is really important because these are really historic moments. And I wish that there is some sort of just some sort of understanding of what happened in the place that it happened. I would love to see it. I visited these places many times, but I never see anything. And it's not that hard to put up a memorial plaque and to do a bit of research around the place. So I think something like that would be good, just to make subsequent generations also aware of what happened in the places that they frequent on an everyday basis, right? That these were parts of history.